We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined this week by Agri-Pulse founder and president Sara Wyant, and looking forward to discussing a wide variety of subjects as we kick off the year 2022. And Sara, I think anyone that had a TV connection and was following social media this week, yesterday in particular, knows that this week, of course, being the 1-year anniversary of January 6th, and that's something that it's unmistakable to the fabric of Washington now. Sara, your thoughts on just kind of where things stand, as obviously everyone, it's one of those seminal moments. Everyone knows where they were when they first saw the footage on January 6th, but where are we now a year later, do you think?
Well, Spencer, good morning. And I think that one of the things that we have to keep in mind, of course, as our Agri-Pulse team, we had a team member who was in the Capitol and did get an alert to get out before he was harmed. But the impact of this is so strong in so many different directions. And we saw President Biden go to the Capitol this week and give a very forceful speech that was pointed and at times very angry at everything that had happened, and rightfully so. He also quoted the Bible as saying, we shall have the truth and the truth shall set us free. So obviously we are all looking forward to knowing more about exactly how everything came about and more about why. But I think the long-term implications for us as journalists is that this just makes the partisanship that we already have been experiencing in Congress even that much more entrenched. And as we try to look at our brand promise of having balanced insight and trusted information, we like to reach out to both Republicans and Democrats, but increasingly they aren't talking to each other. And that's very unfortunate.
Yes, and obviously something that we're keeping an eye on because of, just as you mentioned, that broader Hill climate and the overall impact that has not only on farm policy, but on policy writ large. And some of the various aspects of some of the things that we cover. But speaking of the things, yeah,
the ag committees have historically been very bipartisan, and the differences have been more geographic than based along party lines. And that's been wonderful for so many people in agriculture to work that way, and they would like to see that continue at some point in time.
Well, of course, and on that note, some of the things that folks have been working on saw a little bit of a boost this week. Some folks looking to increase the processing capacity in the nation's meat sector. We did see the Biden administration announce the dedication of about $1 billion in funding for that, something that they're looking to do through a kind of a pair of investments, one this spring, one later this summer. And Sara, I thought it was noteworthy that in the process, we had the opportunity to talk, to hear from the president and the secretary, as well as speak to the secretary. I would encourage folks to look at our coverage on agripulse.com on this subject. But I thought it was noteworthy the tact that the White House took in terms of who they feel is responsible for some of the food price concerns that we're seeing in America's grocery stores and restaurants at the moment.
Yes, this is a very strong frontal challenge to the nation's meat and poultry processors. And obviously their case is, hey, we have been consolidated for a long time. There's really nothing new about that. But food inflation is obviously taking a bite out of consumers' pocketbooks in a much bigger way. So to the extent that, the investments here can go a long ways towards building more diversification in the meat and poultry supply of processors, great. But Spencer, you had a great article that's now online. It was in our newsletter this week, providing that additional perspective about what's actually happening with cattle markets and where capacity is heading.
Right. And I thought I had the chance to speak to a couple of agricultural economists just to kind of get their take on just the natural ebb and flow of where things stand with what's, folks call the cattle cycle, which is basically sometimes we have more cattle than less. And there's typically sort of a wave graphic involved there. And right now we're headed on a downward slope of sorts in terms of cattle inventory. That's happening at the same time the administration is seeking to expand processing capacity, which is going to make for an environment of some, potentially some really tight margins for some of these new facilities looking to come online. And for some of these facilities, it's going to be the mom and pop butcher shop that isn't necessarily as vulnerable to the waves of the cattle markets as might be a small to mid-sized packer. But USDA is also looking to fund some small to mid-sized packers with this announcement, and those will be vulnerable to that ebb and flow. And so, really, the proof is going to be in the pudding in terms of the market conditions once these facilities open here in a couple of years. Something that we're going to be keeping a very close eye on, just to see what level of participation those facilities are going to have in the markets in a couple of years. One thing I did think was particularly interesting that the secretary noted in our conversation was that he was insisting on some clawback language for the use of this funding, looking to prevent a scenario where USDA funds some facilities and then a few years later, the big four comes in and buys them up. This is something where they're looking to make sure that processing capacity ownership infrastructure stays diversified. So would encourage folks to stop by agripulse.com, look through that coverage from this week's announcement out of the Biden administration. But one thing that we also want to touch on here today is that, of course, the Supreme Court hearing, I think literally as we speak, as we record this here on at midday on Friday Eastern time. But the Supreme Court hearing arguments on a vaccine mandate and whether and the potential merits thereof. But also, Sarah, we're watching for a number of Supreme Court cases that could be relevant to food and agriculture, and some news that might be coming out of the High Court here in the next few days.
Absolutely. We've got Steve Davies watching that carefully today, and we're glad he is. We're going to be keeping a close eye on the challenge to Prop 12 in California, which a lot of people have been decidingly worried about because of what might be the impact on bacon prices, for gosh sakes, and a lot of other meat products. So what's happening there, as well as the challenge to WOTUS, always a strong concern for farm country and what's going to happen with the waters of the U.S. regulations. So there are a lot of things at stake in the Supreme Court today, and stay tuned to our coverage for more on that.
So yeah, obviously we're keeping a close eye on the Supreme Court, but just broadly speaking, as we look throughout the rest of the 2022 agenda, just kind of want to wrap up quickly, just filling you all in on some things that we're going to be watching for. First of which is obviously the government funding conversation. We did see a continuing resolution from Capitol Hill leadership in early December that funded the government through mid-February. And of course, mid-February in the grand scheme of legislative politics is not that far away. And so we're watching for some kind of action in terms of avoiding a government shutdown by that deadline. We did see some reports emerging this week that folks on Capitol Hill a little bit more interested in a full year omnibus spending package to avoid continuing to pass continuing resolutions in February, but rather pass something that will take them through the end of the fiscal year. And so we'll be keeping a close eye on that. Also going to be watching for some hearings out of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees as those two panels look to start oversight of the 2018 Farm Bill, preparing to rewrite that legislation before it expires here in 2023. Obviously, the midterm elections later this year will have a big impact on who is in charge in writing that legislation. But Sarah, the Farm Bill is not just something we're going to be keeping an eye on in our regular daily coverage, but as I understand it, also looking forward to having a big, broad event with a lot of comprehensive conversation on the Farm Bill later this year.
Absolutely. And I hope all of our viewers will mark their calendars for March 21st, where we'll be meeting hopefully in person at the National Press Club, as well as having a virtual component to an event that's going to lay the groundwork for the next Farm Bill, which, as you noted, will be looking to pass a new one again out for 2023. So that may seem like a long ways off, but I think there's a lot of work to be done discussing the impact that we've had with so much government stimulus because of COVID, because of market facilitation issues, because of all the congestion at the ports. I mean, there's just been a lot of supply chain disruptions, and we've had a lot of federal support. But now, how do we go forward? Obviously, if some components of Build Back Better do get finally approved, Senator Manchin kind of put the kibosh on that again this week, but he has suggested that he be open to some of the climate provisions. And we're talking about the potential for $82 billion in ag provisions that were in the House passed package of 1.7 trillion. So, there could be a lot of things that come out of something like that. But absent that, where do we want to go? What does the safety net look like? What should crop insurance look like, given that we have some folks calling for more permanent and standing disaster programs? What kinds of nutrition programs do we need going forward, given that, again, we've had a lot of these boosts, even as we've written today, plus ups in a lot of the nutrition security. So we just want to explore those things, bring leading experts together on March 21st, and really set the stage for the discussions to come.
So as Sara mentioned, not just something that we're following on a daily basis, but an event that we're looking forward to hosting, again, hopefully in person at the Press Club here in Washington, D.C., but would encourage everyone to mark their calendars, plan on participating in that event and the vital conversations that will take place there. But I think we went a little long here this week, but I think that's noteworthy just considering the amount of things that we're watching, not only this week and throughout the rest of the year. And also excited to note that be on the watch for the Agri-Pulse team. We're hitting the road here as early as this weekend. Sara and I heading to Atlanta for the American Farm Bureau Federation's annual convention, and so it begins at that point. The travel season a lot busier this year than it was a year ago, and we're grateful for it. It's always great to get out and interact with Agri-Pulse readers and viewers and listeners. So I think that's going to do it for this week. So for Sara Wyant, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.